Hello and welcome to my channel, Boo Snakes and More. Today we're going to be talking about 11 comics everyone needs to read before they die. So please like this video and subscribe to the channel. And for more videos like this, watch my other house channel, A&A Snakes and Stuff, my youngest son's channel, Henny's Toys and Games, or my oldest son's channel, Little Chris 10. Now let's dive into the video. Making lists is hard, but picking 10 genre-defining works is even more difficult. And yet, that's what we're aiming to do here as part of our ongoing comic book package. We're selecting 10 of the best comic book series ever. So how do you even begin to sum up the best tears from a medium that has existed for hundreds of years? Well, it helps there are some generally accepted pillars of the medium that any list worth its salt should include. So yes, we'll find some of those here. You'll find some of those here. But how do you fill out the rest? Our approach was to nail down character-defining tales for some of the most well-known comic book characters, toss in a classic crossover event, and even try to identify what may consist of it as a modern classic. With that in mind, you'll find a wide range of stories that run the gambit of what's possible within the confines of a printed page, each with its own unique perspective and story to tell. And like any good list, this isn't a de facto end-all, be-all list, but rather a jumping-off point for those new to the medium to discover some classics before solidifying their individualized taste and preferences. Nevertheless, here's our collection of the 10 best comic book stories ever for you to discover for the first time or revisit for the 100th. Batman Year 1, 1987. Batman The Dark Knight Returns, 1986. Yes, this is a cheat, but it's a worthy one. Under the pen of Frank Mugler, Batman Year 1 and Batman The Dark Knight Returns represent the alpha and omega of storytelling for the great Crusader. Alpha and omega of storytelling for the great Crusader is a bar set so high that every other Batman story lives in the shadow of these two masterpieces. Year 1, illustrated by David Michelinie, broadened by Richmond Lewis colors, and Todd Klein's letters, takes the bare bones of what original Batman creators Bob Kane and Bill Finger established and evolved, and then sets the de facto organ for the character. Hell, even cinematic versions of the character are indebted into the story. The Dark Knight Returns is not only one of the best Batman stories ever, it's one of the best comics ever. Full stop. Responsible for opening the door for comics to tell more mature stories. Miller's written and drawn series with links by Claus Johnson, letters by John Castellano, and colors by Lane Valley introduced an older version of the character, one more rough and tumble and keen to push himself to the limits of his code to execute his vision of justice. Loaded with breaking-taking sequences across densely populated grids and richly emotional character moments, it's a defining tale for an iconic character, with a boundary-pushing story that's impaired generations of readers and comic book storytellers alike. Muse, 1980 to 1991, written and illustrated by Art Spiegelman. Art Spiegelman's non-fiction autobiography stands shoulder to shoulder alongside Watchmen and The Dark Knight Returns as one of the most important works in the medium, a powerful story that became the first graphic novel to win a Pulitzer Prize, based on Spiegelman's interviews with his father, a Holocaust survivor. Muse refashions the genocide with Jews as mice and Germans as cats through a framed story that doesn't skim on the personal, lived experience of victims and survivors like the two other masterworks mentioned alongside it. Muse redefined the medium and forced people and outsiders to take comics seriously, and its impact still lingers to this day, as evidenced by the 2022 backlash to a decision made by a Tennessee County school board to remove it from the curriculum. Cavan's Last Hunt, 1987. For as much time as comics spend diving into the psyche of the heroes that populate and popularize the genre, villains don't often receive the same focus. But Cavan's Last Hunt changed all that. While universally held as one of the best Spider-Man stories, so much so that it served as the inspiration for the recent Spider-Man 2 video game for PlayStation 5, writer J.M. DeMatteis, artist Mike Zink, inker Bob McLeod, letterer Rick Parker, and colorist Bob Sheehan's tale is unique because it's a story told almost exclusively from the villain's point of view. Cavan's misbegotten belief that he can be a better Spider-Man leads him to leave Peter for dead, only to realize that Spider-Man's power doesn't lie in his superhuman abilities, but in his power to represent and be the very best definition of a hero. Hawkeye 2012 to 2015. It's hard to judge amid a creative work whether or not it would or could live on a masterwork. But at a certain point during Matt Fraction and David Ayer's Hawkeye series, the conventional wisdom around the title morphed into an understanding that the comics community had a certified banger on its hand, pitched as what the author does when he's not avenging. Fiction and Alloy's take on Clint Burton brings the topical epic scale of superheroing down to ground level. Clint and Kate Bishop aren't saving the world, they're saving an apartment building in Brooklyn. In this simple but effective premise, Fraction and Alloy use the medium for all sorts of incredible visual tales, whether it's an entire issue told from the perspective of a dog or an issue told entirely through sign language. Hawkeye finds its mark as a modern masterclass on what kinds of stories are possible in comics. Civil War 2006 through 2007. Heroes vs. Heroes is a tried and true staple of the comic book genre, but few stories executed at the blockbuster level that Civil War does. Crossover events can sometimes require decades of context to understand, but what makes the Mark Millar written tale accessible is the sometimes cartoonishly stakes deeply understandable. In the wake of a superhero-driven tragedy, the entirety of the Marvel Universe has to take sides over government regulation. It's a simple promise executed to perfection by Millar, highlighted by clinic art from Stephen McNiven, inks by Dexter Vines, colors by Molly Hallowell, and letters from the best in the game, Chris Ulysses. It also has the real distinction of being one of the few Marvel events in recent memory with ramifications still found in comics today. A rare feat to achieve when there's a new, massive crossover every 6 months. The Dark Phoenix Saga, 1980. Full of drama, high stakes, incredible world building, and a character-first narrative, the Dark Phoenix Saga remains the watershed X-Men story, one so influential and popular it's had two different and failed cinematic adaptations detailing the corruption of John Gray by the Cosmic Phoenix Force. The saga cheats charts the X-Men's collective in anguished attempts to save one of their own. It's a micro-explanation of micro-reasons that the characters of this team, so universally beloved, powered by a cosmic creative force, that's to say Chris Clements' Poe's and John Barry's phenomenal art, the Dark Phoenix Saga, is a defining moment for the X-Men, Marvel, and comics as a whole, showing what's possible when creators are operating at their respective peaks. Watchmen, 1986 to 1987. Recommending Watchmen as rightfully traumatic, influential, and great as it is, right out of the gate, to a new comic book reader can often be very overwhelming. Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons, and John Wiggins' genre-defining work is dense. The deconstructional themes at play across its layered 9-panel grid in 12 issues hit harder if readers are more familiar with the archetypes of the superhero genre. It's not to say you can't come into it cold and find some level of appreciation, but exploring other stories in the medium before reading it may benefit some readers. The thematic tome still resonates as a tale about superheroes themselves, anti-regimes, who gets to weird power and more. It can be a lot to take in all at once, but nevertheless, Watchmen is a watershed entry that revitalized the kinds of stories that comics, and only comics, could tell. March 2016. The autobiography trilogy from Congressman John Lewis isn't even a decade old at this point, but is already well on its way to achieving the critical status of a malice. The story goes that Lewis was inspired by a 10-cent comic published by the Fellowship of Recognition called Martin Luther King and the Montgomery story, which spawned him into action at 15 to fight for civil rights. Decades later, during his 2018 re-election campaign, Lewis mentioned the story to his telecommunications and technology policy aide, Andrew Aydin, which then inspired Aydin to get Lewis to write a comic about his experiences in the civil rights movement, brought to life through Nate Power's incredible visuals. March is a powerful historical account of one of the biggest and most important moments in our history, one that can and will go on to inspire a new generation, just like Montgomery's story did all those years ago. All-Star Superman, 2005 to 2008. Superheroes, especially Superman, are often posed as gods, so why draw inspiration from classical mythology? Grant Morrison and Frank Quarterly's All-Star Superman refashions the 12 laborers of Hercules for the Man of Steel's final days. Poisoned by the sun that he draws his powers from, Superman sets out to complete a series of tasks to help out humanity and Kryptonians alike. free from the burdens of continuity, Morrison's story pulls from all of Superman's history to tell perhaps the de facto tale about the character, rendered with iconic visuals from quietly like a moon-bound date between Spiros and Lewis. Fights with Lex, or quieter moments like when he saves a girl from suicide. Superman sometimes gets a rep as being a boring character, but it's likely the people rising that criticism hasn't read this unbelievably compassionate celebration of a cultural icon. Philosophist, 2004. Mary Jane Stewart's masterful memoir continues to be challenged to this day despite its importance to the medium in storytelling writ large, detailing her life from childhood to young adulthood before and after the Islamic Revolution. Philosophist is singularly fascinating in its presumption as a feminist tale as a graphic memoir of the intersection and juxtaposition of public and private life, and so much more, equal parts hilarious and crushing. It's a can't miss tell and a high mark for comics. Thank you for watching this video and peace out to the next one.